tell me some of the stuff you've got lying around in here. Like, that looks like a Jeff Bath cover or something like that.
Yeah, that's come off this one. It's a lay down there. One of the early models.
Yep.
You see it there?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, whose bike was that?
Originally it was John Jorgensen. John Jorgensen's a Dane, and he come out here. He married a girl from here. Her father lives in Kingaroy.
I'm here in Queensland with collarbone Rogerson, a long time person involved in Speedway bikes and rider training now. But as you sit in front of me, Cole, how would you describe yourself nowadays?
Almost worn out. Oh no, it's not that bad. I'm 70 now, I don't mind telling you that, but it doesn't get any easier, but I'm still enjoying life, and I'm still trying to help the young ones, and still training people, giving them a licence, so I haven't quite lost the plot yet.
This was the thing that caught my eye immediately. What's the story with this little car you got here?
The guy that built this was an aeroplane engineer, Joe Harbeck, his name was, I think.
Right.
It's on the side of the car here. Joe Graybeck. And his son owns Crimson. That's where the Crimson sticks on.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. And Joe built that out of helicopter parts. And I've got a motor here to put in it, which I didn't know for my grandkids, and they're all a bit old now.
What's it made with?
No, it's just a little 110 on gearbox and clutch, so they get used to using the clutch.
It's very cool for me to see this, because today we're out at Kingaroy, the Speedway showgrounds there, and nowadays it's predominantly a car racing style track, but you guys have a junior track on the inside. And my point being, you're out there today training and helping the future youth to become better riders.
Yeah, that's where I get my satisfaction these days, preparing the track for them and helping them to become better riders, and just telling someone something and then watching them do it gives you real satisfaction. It's terrific.
Stuff lying around everywhere, mate.
Oh yeah, the collecting, yeah. The old leathers on the wall there.
Yeah. But explain to me what some of these other bikes are. So going through here, this white bike here, what sort of bike's that?
That's a 2-valve Jawa.
Yep.
That's the same as what I raced. That's done up exactly the way mine was, with the colours, the seat.
Yep.
Exactly how I raced there.
Yeah, right. And did you ever go to the 4-valve style?
No.
So that was after your time?
Yep. Westlake come in shortly after. I started off on Jap, I had a Myosin Jap first, and I went to 2-valve.
It's funny too, because we talked about this before. When you were younger, it was all about the thrill of going fast and things like that, but it's interesting to note how the shift is now for you to be the educator.
Well, I think when you're young, and to be a good racer, to be honest, you've probably got to be selfish, because if you want to be the best, you've got to concentrate on yourself and be very selfish to get to the top. And that's a fact. And we were all fairly selfish when we were younger, I think. And now it's my turn to give back to the young ones and try and help them. And one day they'll appreciate what we've done for them, I'm sure.
The bike next to it, what sort of bike is that, and what year and that sort of thing?
That's a 3940 Jap, and the reason we know it's that old, the crankcases on them are aluminium, the later ones are magnesium crankcases, so, and that's a 5-stud, that's fairly rare bike, and you might notice it's got an advancing retard on the side there. Very rare to have that on a Speedway bike. A lot of the old ones, they used it way back then, but then they got rid of it. try them for a while.
And
So
there is quite a lot of stuff that just continuously captures my eye, so we will switch back and forth, but I see you've got a bit of old memorabilia up there, like an old Jack sign up there, and what do you got up there? Is that a Kingaroy wheel or something?
yes, that come with this old Jap actually. Come with that. And that's exactly what they had there. Looking at that Jap again, just something I recall, that's got a 22-inch back wheel.
Yeah,
Very
I was
rare
gonna
these
say.
days. Most of them are 9.
Now, with these interviews, I jump around all over the shop because that's how my brain works and that's how it is. But I want to start from the start. So, where did you grow up and how did you grow up?
I grew up in Kingaroy here, born in 1951. We were fairly poor. My father was an invalid pensioner. We never had a lot when we were kids. We started off on a 28-inch push bike, riding it through under the bar, Dad's push bike, and grease all over your legs and busters and broken arms and things like that. But it was a good upbringing. We had a really good upbringing, I think. My mother's still alive. She's 96 now. She was give us a good start in life, I feel. And I had a fascination for motorbikes always, as long as I can remember. I can remember running out the front. There was a guy on a BSA and another guy, his mate on a Triumph. Used to work at an engineering works up the road, and I'd race out every morning and just watch them go past. And that was the start of my day. That was the highlight of my day. And I dream about that all day, you know. And I learned to ride when I was 12. A mate had a 500cc Norton, and I learned to ride on that. And I just had a passion for it ever since, and I just love it. And that brings me to the next one there, that frame. That's a 1930 Rudge. Now, talk about 4 valves, that's the engine up there out of it, and that's a 4-valve Rudge engine. So that's way back in 1930, 4-valve engine. So that's a 500cc. We've got a little magneto. That engine's almost ready to go in there, and I can set it up. That's a fairly rare bike. It has the knee hook, so the leg trail.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, I do want to pause for a minute.
Yep.
Why have you got a sidecar?
Sidecar.
Of course you bring a sidecar man to a style that makes sense. What's the front end there? What's that in?
Do you know Bob Cowley?
Definitely.
Yeah, that's one of Bob Cowley's.
Selfishly for me, there is a by the way for me doing this, and part of it is you knew my father, you know my Uncle Ron, and other people, and after this I'm going to another friend of yours, Dale Stone's place, but we all tie in some way, shape or form, and as we touched on in the raw footage, I've already done an interview with you at North Brisbane, but not to the level we're doing now, and I'm getting a massive kick out of being around you, Cole. You are such a wealth of history and bikes and things in general. It's really cool.
Oh, thanks, Dave. I wish my memory was a lot better. It's not as good as it could be, but I've got the books there and I can refer to the books. And Tony Webb's been good. He's documented a lot of things, and you go through that and refreshes your memory. That's great.
This bike here.
Yep.
What's the deal with this bike?
That's a Godden. I just like the engines, Godden engines,
Yeah.
and I was looking for a Godden engine for a long time, and that one come up. It's a Godden frame as well. It's,
Do you know about this one either?
No, this is the one you surprised me with, actually.
So we'll get back to racing, and what was the first thing you raced in regards to bikes?
I started off on the stock bikes in the late 60s at the local track in town. I can remember I had a matchless, and it was a 500cc, a 1949 model, rigid back end. made up a little brass fuel tank to sit on top of the bar, took the old tank off, put a small seat on, stripped all excess weight off it, guards, generator and things like that, we threw them away, headlights, taillights, mud guards, and just turned them into a racer, like a stock bike. And that's what I started with. And then I bought one off Bernie Porter later on, an AJS 500, which was a really good bike. And I managed to get that back, and I've got to restore it back to what it was back then. That's how I started. Then I bought a Myson Jack off a guy named Tommy Ball in Brisbane, and didn't have a lot of luck with that one. We rebuilt the engine, and shortly after broke the con rod and destroyed the engine. So I bought a Jawa after that. I don't know if anyone remembers Lex Fielding, but Lex Fielding was killed, I think about 1970 it probably was. This was a 69 model anyway, and I bought the bike off Lex's widow, and that was a really good bike. So that was my first Jawa. And that's the one I finished up taking to England in 1973, and it was a good one. Yeah, so that's what that is.
So
That's a two-stroke. Yeah.
And then what do we got next to it?
That one's a Montesa, and that belonged to Kev Torpy. It's one of Kev Torpy's bikes. Kev had that for years. I bought it off Kev. Montesa.
Wow.
Trials bike, that is.
I was going to say, it looks like something.
A lot of Speedway riders use trials bikes for throttle control.
Yeah.
To help them with their throttle control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what do you got down here?
It's a little 75 Honda that I bought some parts to restore, but I haven't got around to it yet. But that's another job. Everywhere you look here, you see work.
Yeah. So prior to going to England, it obviously started clicking, and you obviously started making motion forward on a solo. When did you start to have inklings or achievements that let you know that England was a possibility?
I was only a C grader here, and battling, and I lived up in the country. I had to travel. In those days, I used to travel down to Brisbane. One qualifying ride we got, and you had to win that ride to get on the program for the night. That's how tough it was then. So, and I was always lucky. I always won that race and got on the program. So I was very lucky in that sense. But so I had more rides, and then later rode at Ipswich, and went up north one year, rode in Townsville, Cairns. We used to ride in Maryborough. We used to go down over the border and ride at Lismore, Grafton.
Just for the camera, how old are you, Con?
70 now.
You're serious, and you've got all this work, and it gets done, and
I've got to get into it, haven't I?
Yeah, it's crazy. But keep pointing and telling me what's what.
That's a Suzuki, a 65 set Suzuki, 200 twin. And I bought that off John Tickle from John. It was a runner. It just needs a clutch fixing now. The clutch, it's not registered anymore. I've ridden it runners and things. This one's a 24 AJS big port. Now,
That's okay.
See the pipe on that?
Yeah,
This is why they call them a big port.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if you notice this, that U-bolt, that's all that holds the head and barrel on.
Wow.
Just one U-bolt. But in the old days, the racers used to have these to ride to work every day. They'd take them to the Speedway and race them on the Saturday night, ride them home again and put the lights back on and ride them home, and then ride them to work all day.
You did do a bit of travel around Australia in parts, but why England?
We're at a Gold Coast meeting, and we're all C graders. Kev Torpy was probably the only A grader there, I think, from memory. And it was a very slick track. And we were going around flat out, going backwards, and couldn't understand why Kev was making it look so easy. And I went home that night and I thought about it, and I thought, this guy's been to England, he knows something I don't know. And so I just said to Mum, I'm going to pack up and go to England. I had a car, I sold that paid me airfare. I packed my bike up in a crate and sent that, and didn't have a lot of money, but that's what I did. And I learned a lot in a short time, I can tell you.
And for the people playing at home, that's a similar sort of bolt set up on, say, a leaf spring in the back of a Falcon or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Just more tightens and pulls it all down. You see the exposed valves there?
Yeah, and that's amazing. Alright, and then
There's one missing there, the Triumph's in the back of the van. This one I take to the Shannon shows. It's a 1912 Triumph, I can show you that later. But this one's a GCS. This one's an Australian motorbike.
yeah,
It was built in Melbourne. I don't know if you've heard of Stillwell Ford.
yeah, I do. Exactly. Yep.
Yep. Well, Stillwell Ford, Bibb Stillwell, used to race cars with Bob Jane,
Yeah.
and Bibb's great-grandfather, it's George Cyril Stillwell. That's a 770 V12 Jap. But they were made in Japs in the and that's a belt drive, and it's got a 100 clutch on it.
So that is a very similar principle to a belt drive on a car, where you get a tensioner, you know, things like that. Just runs all that order.
Yeah.
Where did you land, and what was the club you got involved with in England?
I can remember the night before we had a bit of a send-off, and Macca was there. They were all there, and Bert Kingston was there. And Bert Kingston said to me, I was pretty green in those days. I was a country boy, and probably didn't. I knew a lot of the guys in the city in Brisbane, but weren't close, you know. So when you're isolated up in the country, it's a bit tougher sometimes. And Bert said to me, have you organised anyone over their team or anything? And I said, no, I was just going to go over and see what I could get. And he said, here's a number of a guy, and this guy's number he gave me was Reg Fairman. And he said, if you're in trouble, give Reg a ring. So I got to Heathrow, a rainy Monday morning, I think it was, and I'd organised to go by bus from the airport to King's Cross Station, or Victoria Street Station it was, and then I was going to get a train up to Halifax, where John Titman was. I knew John. But hadn't made very close arrangements. We didn't have mobile phones, and we didn't even have a phone at home in them days. I used to have to write letters back home, you know. That's how it was. And so I got there, and I thought, customs went through me. I had my leathers in a suit carrier over my arm with a suitcase, and customs looked at me. I thought Eagle Farm was a big airport in them days, till I got to Heathrow. And these blokes got a hold of me and went through me, and anyway, that was all right. I hadn't done anything wrong. So I thought, I got into Victoria Street Station, and the day was nearly gone, and I thought, where am I going to be sleeping tonight? So I had nothing planned, so I thought, I'll give this Reg Fairman a ring, see? So I rang him up, and he said, I'll send a lad out to pick you up. So this young bloke turns up in a little Cortina, and he's taken me back to where Reg Fairman lived, at Reading, Henley on Thames it was, and this is Ringo Starr's house, and someone else, and oh yeah, this is good, you know. And we got there, and Anders Michnik's washing his E-type Jag out in the front lawn, and I thought, gee, this is all right, you know. And I used to smoke in them days, and I was sitting there smoking a cigarette, waiting for Reg. He was in his office, and he come out and he said, so you want to be a Speedway rider? And I said, yep. And I was 22 at the time, I think. Knew everything, you know, how it is. And he said, well, if you want to be a Speedway rider, put that cigarette out, he says. And that's where it all began anyway. And he said, look, John's coming down to race at, I think it was Reading that night or something.
It's just seeing what people have and what they keep. Now, Evie, what's your hoarding crime? Are you into bikes or what's your
I
thing?
love bikes, but not all this. Like, I keep saying, tidy it up. You'll never live long enough to enjoy all the things you've got to do. Is that
I'm
correct?
working on that.
You keep saying that.
Yep. To keep a workload is a good thing. It's something to look forward to. You know, if you run out of work, I think you might stop and sort of pass out.
That's
you
it.
know,
I think you're right. Yeah.
What about
Busy.
time?
Well, you sort of
Run
raised
out
a
of
valid
time.
point, you know.
And he'll take you back, you know. And anyway, so that's how it worked out. And Eddie Argyle turned up somehow. I can't remember how, but he was on a different flight, and he'd made better arrangements than me. And anyway, we got together. John took us back, and it all started. Ted Argyle.
Oh, yes.
Eddie Argyle, Ted was his father. Ted used to ride bikes. Ted built frames, and Steve Coppy and I used to ride his frames.
Yep.
We were like his test riders. This was the first frame Ted built, and it had a Jap engine in it.
Right.
And not that engine, but Tito's got the engine out of it. And John rode the bike around exhibition. So this is Ted Argyle, Drive Master he called him. So it's DM1, this frame, DM1. That's the first frame he built. And I've got to finish that off.
Yeah, definitely. When did you start putting, boot to track sort of thing?
It was crazy what I did everything wrong. But how else do you learn?
Exactly.
I was a kid from the country, and I was full of confidence, I guess. I wouldn't even dream of doing that now. But that's what you did. It was an adventure, that's all it was. And what happened, I sent the bike over, and it was supposed to go to Leeds, but it was late getting there, and it finished up at Liverpool. That's another story, but it arrived a couple of months late. So the season had started by the time I got a motorbike. And Eddie was well known. His father raced over there at Wembley, somewhere over there. And so they gave Ed a loan of a bike and give him a ride, but I was unknown, so nobody wanted to know me. And so it was pretty tough from the start. It was costing a fair bit of money, so I was there 2 days, and I got a job. I got a job as a welder. And I finished up living there, and the guy that I worked for was really good for me, good to me. And last time I went back over, I caught up with him, and we're still good friends, you know. So that was Joe Ainsley. Joe was a bit of a character, but he looked after me very well. And so that got me on my feet a bit. I had cheap accommodation and a job. And then when the bike arrived, went to pick it up, and it's a long story, but we finished up. They wouldn't let us take the bike out of the docks, you know, at the wharf, if you like. So we had to sleep. Eddie was with me, and we were in a Bedford van, and we had to sleep in the Bedford that night, waiting to pick the bike up, the crate up the next morning. And freezing cold, and all we had was a few old rags and things, and we'd sit in the bucket seat sleeping, and then we'd get cold, and we'd start the engine up, heat the car up a bit. Some more old engines and things. That's a Jap engine, that's a mag engine, they're Swiss made.
Right.
A few Jap heads and barrels and things, gearbox. That's a Norton gearbox and Norton clutch. That's out of the first stock bike I ever owned, which I've got over here that I've got to restore again back
So,
to.
Cole, just explain to the people at home what a stock bike is and what period of time that was.
Well, stock bikes were old. Over here. Yeah, a stock bike was an old. That's an old matchless AJS stock bike. It was pre-50s sort of thing. But they were any era really, but the old English bikes, and we just stripped them down, took all the lugs off for the tanks and things, and turned them into a race bike. But before that we went round a couple of pubs in Liverpool, Eddie just reminded me the other day, he said, remember that night we walked into that pub in Liverpool and ordered a beer and the whole place just went quiet. Everybody looked at us. So we drank the beer and gone. But that was Liverpool. But anyway, we got the bike, and what we had to do then, the mistake I made was going over freelancing. I paid my own fare, but if you can, I wasn't good enough to get anyone to pay my fare over probably. So, but if you're good enough to go over, someone pays your fare, they'll use you then. But they paid for other riders, and I was going around riding second halves and beating their riders, but they weren't interested in me because they hadn't invested in me. They invested in their own riders. And it wasn't until one guy broke his leg in a team that
When you're over in England, it's obviously literally the other side of the world and things like that. Was it a massive culture shock coming from Queensland to go there? And if so, what was some of the things that really stood out as so strange compared to Queensland?
It certainly was. Queensland is nothing like England. The weather's a big factor for a start. I had a cellar. I was lucky enough to have a cellar to work on my bike, but this cellar was stone and under the ground and very cold and damp. So different to the conditions here where it's hot and dry. Everything can go rusty and things like that, you know. But the question you ask, the culture shock. I have friends in Adelaide now that the Munson boys that I see regularly and keep in touch with, and I said to them when I went to Adelaide, I couldn't believe how much Adelaide was like England. And I said, you guys didn't have a culture shock at all. It's just the same, really, you know. Weather's a bit different, but stone fences, stone houses, like it, very similar. Here it's all wooden high houses, totally different, you know. But the food. The food was different over there, not a lot of meat over there, it was very expensive. And the way they lived, in the small houses and inside a lot, you know, like here we live outdoors, over there we live indoors. And the fact that most people, you'd pull up and ask someone for directions, that was the thing that used to get me, and they'd say, oh, I don't know, I haven't been out of this town. They didn't travel much, you know. So being a Speedway rider, you travel a lot. And them days we didn't have navigators or anything, but I can remember going into a town looking for the Speedway track, and the first thing you do is look for the stadium lights. They're always up high, and you say, well, we'll head for those and see what's there, you know. And that's how we used to find the Speedway.
Before you came back to Australia, or did you only come back to Australia after you stopped riding?
No, I stayed there for the season, the first season, and did it tough. I admit I did it very tough. And John Tidman come up to Teesside with me, the last meeting I did over there, and helped me negotiate with Reg Fairman for a fare back for 2 years. And he did that, he was paying my fare back for 2 years, which was a bonus, you know. So my plan was to come back home, earn as much money as I could, work like crazy at home, and save enough money so I could do it a bit better, have a better vehicle. I was very lucky the first year. Joe Ainsley, the guy I lived with, the guy I worked for, he would loan me, he had a little brand new Morris van, he'd loan me that. So I was looked after pretty well a lot of times, you know. But I wanted to do it a bit easier, and so I'd come back to earn the money, and I was riding for Australia short circuit against there's an English team out, and I finished up breaking my collarbone there, and I was out for a month while that healed, and then I was back 2 weeks after that when I broke my neck, and that was really the end, you know. I was working with John Titman at Blimmer Motorcycles at the time for Ernie Sues, and I used to go to work for half a day. I had a neck brace on, one with the rods that used to push your neck up like that, and I was oxy welding crash bars together. So I'd bend my back and weld these things up for half a day, and then I'd go home and go to bed because I was absolutely knackered. And I was just doing this to try and get the money so I could go back. And after 3 months of this, I was in a bad place. I didn't realise at the time, but when I look back now, I was in a really bad place, you know. When you're injured, when you're racing, it's great. Everyone wants to know you. When you're injured, you're forgotten.
Once you decided it was over, sort of thing, what became of you after that?
I helped a couple of lads, Robbie Lasson, helped Robbie Lasson. I don't know if you remember Robbie, probably way before your time, yeah, he would be. But I run into him a while back. He lives in Budrum now, but I helped him for a while. I used to travel around with him and past midnight. He finished up racing in South Africa, I think, and I think he might have went to England too. I just forget now. But I helped Robbie for a while. Robbie Ashton, I mentored him a little bit. Robbie was very good. He didn't need much help, but he was a very good rider and could have gone on to being a world champion. So I put a bit, and then we moved back to Kingaroy eventually, and I lost track of it for a while. And it wasn't until Cordell got involved that the flame got relit.
You've got a very special lady in your life, in Evie, and she's welcomed us into your house like we live here for good. You know what I mean? She's just that personable and that sort of thing. So how did Evie come about?
To be honest, I met Evie, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months before I went to England, and I'd made my mind up. I was going, you know, and you meet this lady that's fairly special, and you say, listen, I'm going overseas for 6 months, and away you go. And we kept in touch. We wrote letters to each other while we were away, and we both lived our lives, you know. There was nothing. We were just good friends at the time, and we both enjoyed. I enjoyed my time there, and she enjoyed her time here while we were separated. And when I come back, she was still there. And when I come back, my job here. I used to work in Kingaroy at the time. My boss had kept my job for me. He put a temporary person in for the 6 months I was away, so I got my job back. I had no money, so he loaned me his son's motorbike so I could ride to work, and till I saved enough to buy a car. And then I decided it was costing me too much travelling from Kingaroy to Brisbane because I was racing every weekend. So I moved in with Evie in Brisbane, and we lived together there 12 months, and we were married after that. But she's a special woman, and it's the Polish. They love feeding people. I can tell you that. You never go to a Polish person's place with a full stomach. You're in trouble.
Who are some of the people in your career that have been very instrumental in helping you race bikes?
Going back to the start, Max Askew was a local Honda dealer here in town, and Max was very good to me. He used to work on the engines. I'd buy the parts and things, but he'd do the work for me and help me, and his son Bevan helped me. They got me started. And then when I went to England, John Titman helped me a lot. Different things he told me and helped me with, got me on the road. And then Tony Eels, when I come back from England, Tony got hold of me, and Tony's been very good to me, and like we said before, he's still helping Cordell now. And Tony's in his 80s now, and still goes to work, and still helping people, and that's wonderful, you know. Yeah, there's been a lot of other people that have helped me over the years too, you know, and I'd just like to say thank you to them all, you know. Some of those officials in Brisbane, I can remember, I think it was me or someone his name was, one of the guys there that used to get us out on the track, and I met him at I think it was one of the funerals I went to in Brisbane, and I didn't remember him, but he remembered me, and he came up and spoke, and he said, I always remember you, and he said, you know why you got so many rides? See, them days we were busting to get a ride. Now we're trying to get the riders to ride for the promoters, but back then there was too many riders. And he said, you were always ready, and if we needed someone, if someone's bike wouldn't start or something, we'd grab you and send you out because we knew you were always ready and you were willing to do it, you know. And I thought, oh, that's lovely, you know. I don't remember that sort of thing, but that's what other people remember.
Like I said here, this has been a massive treat for me because I actually get to do it properly now, the interview, and you know, I've spent today with your son Simon and your grandson Cordell, and I've been out there and I even hung off the back of the grader when you were grading the track and got some footage, and you know, surely something positive has got to come out of doing all this, and if nothing else, documenting what you've done in your career.
Yeah, well, it's all about the kids now. I've had my day, and I like to see the kids. I'd like to see that club in Kingaroy keep going for many, many years, and become like Mildura, turn out some really good riders from that club, and that would make me very happy. Yeah, this town has produced a few good riders over the years, quite a few good motorbike riders, and there's plenty more to come.